Because I think that there's such this world where carbs and sugar are bad.
But you're not just mainlining, table sugar. That's probably not ideal.
So today on Beyond the Pump, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition, we're actually going to jump into kind of like a part two around the idea of sugar and your clients and things that we know to be true, but also just some of the kind of shit that they're probably thinking of in their brain. And this one's going to be a little bit of a fun one. I'm going to very much take the client centered approach on this side of things because I think sugar is bad for you and you're going to die early if you have too much sugar because that's what the world says. But Andrew is going to talk to us a little bit more around the idea of, why it's probably okay to have 300 grams of sugar when you're running an 8-mile Spartan race. Um, and we even just dropped an episode talking about macronutrients and where they are prioritized in terms of importance when you're working with somebody. But obviously one of the macros is carbs, and sugar is a carb. So when we start thinking about things, it's like, all right, cool. Well, is a potato a sugar? Is a French fry a sugar? I think sugar and carbs are so intertwisted and again, client-centered approach here that it's like, let's just break this down a little bit, have some fun with it, and I think probably disprove all of my thoughts that are still ingrained in me. Because listen, if you're like an 80s baby, 90s, and Atkins was a thing and sugar and all these things, like, it's just, we know the Atkins diet, cut out all the carbs, is the only way to lose weight. So many people think that way. So anyways, Andrew, is a sweet potato and sugar the exact same thing?
Mm. If you trace it down far enough for the average healthy person, yes. If you're not, some of that stuff does start to matter. And, I guess to provide a little context, the reason why we dive into some of these weird offshoot topics that seem like they might be a little more deep than what might be helpful, we need to understand that just to kind of back up for a second and give you the big picture, we construct memories based upon logic. And so by having these deeper understandings, you might not retain the facts. You might not remember the exact mechanisms. And frankly, I don't remember 3/4 of the mechanisms of how shit works. You get really good at starting to like distill things and you recall them in a coaching conversation. You don't need to give them like the minutia of what a GLUT4 transporter is. That's not really the most relevant thing. But you do need to understand that as you're going through exercise, your skeletal muscle tissue is going to be more sensitive to taking in that glucose and storing it as glycogen to replenish the energy that it just expended during activity. So the reason why we go deep, just to help you understand, to have more logic, so that way you can recall it better without remembering the specifics. And so the reason why we're going over this specific topic of kind of like, haha, sweet potatoes versus white rice, by and large, is because there are a lot of nuances and smaller things that we just frankly can't cover in our nutrition consulting course that we've released. So this is where it's a good opportunity for us to go a little bit deeper, where in the course we give you the simple down and dirty version that you can turn around and immediately use in coaching scenarios.
So, fun thing for me, sugar is something that I now slightly understand as a tool to increase my performance. As a client, it's like, oh, okay, if I consume enough carbohydrates, I can go perform and do the thing. And I can last the thing. I can accomplish this thing that I desire to accomplish. And it might relate to a workout. Like, weird, nowadays I consume food before I go work out. For the longest time, I was a fasted workout person. Not because of any magazine story, but rather it just feels better for me. But like now my shake before I go work out in the morning is pushing 650 calories, right? And there's clearly going to be a good amount of carbohydrates in there. So when we think about acquiring a client, in my mind, if you're coaching me, addressing the conversation around sugar is probably a good conversation to have. Andrew, as coaches are listening in here, should they be addressing people's thought process around sugar and carbs, or at least asking some maybe kind of prying questions to understand what underlying thought process people have around sugar and carbs so they can help coach them, again, from the coach side of things?
That's, I mean, That's kind of a challenging question to answer simply for the fact that if you're trying to dispel beliefs and kind of break those false beliefs, so to speak, that can be a little bit of a messy situation. And it depends on how much trust you have. If you're the trusted expert and resource in someone's life, yeah, by all means, it's easy for you to understand that, validate it, and then reframe in a potentially more productive way. That would be generally how I would suggest going about that. But if you're in a new conversation, I think it's really important for coaches to suss out, is this person trying to be validated in their current perspective, which means that they're not really open to new information. And if they are, giving them that new information can actually create friction and reduce trust. But, and this is kind of like if you think about family gatherings, and if you're a health coach and you're in that family gathering, people are like, wow, I'm trying to lose 10 pounds. And like, we all hear it. If you're in the industry, if you someone that's been doing fitness for a while or nutrition, like you're going to potentially be looked at as an expert, even if you're not educated necessarily. And you might tell them the exact same thing every single Thanksgiving for about 5 years in a row. That person didn't really care about what the true answer was. They just wanted to be
I
validated.
love that. It's like somebody comes up, I have this problem. What should I do? You give
Mhm.
them a solution, and then they
Yeah.
just don't do it. And then they ask you the same damn thing. Like I recently had somebody, and we know I'm not like, don't come to me as the nutrition coach guy. Okay. Somebody's like, hey, can you help me? And I'm like, you know what? Sure, no problem. I can
Mhm.
tell you the things that work for me. Clearly not certified, all the components. And I'm like, here's the first thing I need you to do. Just like, where are you at? And like, fill out a food journal so that way I know what the hell you're consuming. So at least have a direction of what's going on. And then it was
Mhm.
like 2 weeks later, here's all the list of excuses. And I'm like, all right, cool. Hey, good luck. Not my jam. But anyway, sorry I interrupted you there.
No, no, no. I mean, that's pretty much, and this is where the people and the process kind of overlap a little bit, because we can use the process to determine if this is a behavioral issue or if it's actually physiological. And we know that the details matter more when the stakes are higher. So if you're a world class athlete and you make millions of dollars, like the margins matter significantly more. If you're just some Joe Schmo and you lose 5 pounds because you feel uncomfortable in your skin and you forget about it the next week when you're out drinking with your buddies, like probably not the person that really cares about the margins. So that's where you're always having to like make sure you're paying attention to what cues that person's sending you to determine, are they receptive to new information, which is the kind of the entry point, right? And then beyond that, do they have the willingness, ability, and readiness to get out there? Which is we introduce that in our coaching framework of like, if you're not willing, cool, like why are we even going to have a conversation around it? If you're not able, meaning you don't have the skills or the knowledge necessary to execute against what you're wanting, it's basically just conjecture and fantasy. And then the third thing is readiness, which is like, okay, are you having the amount of awareness to even go about knowing what the trade-offs are? If you're going in a deficit, you're getting ready for a bodybuilding show or a physique competition, and you're not willing to be hungry and to be uncomfortable, then chances are like you're uninformed around the costs. And B, like it's once you feel a little bit of adversity, people quit. And that's where I think finding those three things out is going to be a really good, crucial component to determining, going back to the original ask of like sweet potatoes versus white rice. Like, well, what's the real question behind the question? And when people ask coaches questions, oftentimes it tends to be from the perspective of, I don't actually care about what the answer is. I care about what you think of me. And I care about more along the lines of like being perceived as someone that's trying and someone that's, and we get a dopamine hit off of that whenever we think that people perceive us positively. So sometimes, most of the time, realistically, unless there's a really big need for that change to happen, they don't care.
Yeah.
So to couch
Now
that.
we know, okay, cool, carbohydrates, you need whatever 150 grams, so go eat sugar or sweet potatoes or white rice or whatever and get your carbs. So
Mm-hmm.
sure, similar in nature there. Micros, all those components. Again, the last episode we recorded about that priority and hierarchy. There's differences there, but the one thing I remember us using is the
Mm-hmm.
CGM, continuous glucose monitor. And admittedly, that's one of those things that I unwillingly did. Like I just hated that thing. That needle was like the size of this freaking microphone going into my arm. It felt like and looked like. Um, but like when it comes to that, and I know we were also looking just like, all right, cool, we're increasing food or we're decreasing food, just making sure that things from a sugar perspective aren't bad. I
Mm-hmm.
also understand, and this is kind of, I guess, maybe a question as well. If I eat just literally pure sugar versus a sweet potato or rice or oatmeal or things that are maybe more complex in nature, that's going to change and impact the blood sugar very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And like what matters there and when does it matter? Maybe would be my question.
Okay, so I think we're kind of moving in the territory of what we call glucose flux. There was a period of time in it, and again, it's 2025 at the recording of this, middle of 2025. I haven't really heard this term as much frequently, but recently, but it was kind of this metabolic flexibility, or basically your body's ability to toggle between using carbs for fuel as a preferred source, which is usually based upon your activity level, what kind of activity you do, as well as what your main food source is. So if you're eating more carbohydrate, your body actually adapts to that. If you eat more fats, your body can actually become fat adapted, simply for the fact that it's just what it has more of. And I think it's usually about a 2 week lag. But when you think about the nature of kind of this glucose flux, there's really like kind of four things you want to understand about it. One is and this is where the CGM can be very telling if you know how to interpret it, like any other tool. You're looking at glucose appearance, which is basically like when you eat something, how fast does it get into your bloodstream? Um, Generally speaking, I mean, that's the majority of it is going to be from consumption. Although I will say that one of the things that people need to understand is that you also can go through a process called gluconeogenesis, which is basically how your body then turns around and produces more glucose from different things like amino acids, so on and so forth, right? So it appears, the other thing that you need to consider is the glucose disposal, or how long it takes for that circulating blood sugar, aka glucose, to get pulled out of the bloodstream. And it's typically going to get stored in places like your liver is a big place for that. But more than anything, blood sugar and glucose gets stored inside of your muscles. That's right. And it gets stored as glycogen, as Steve shows us his glycogen store. So if you want to pick up line this summer, you just ask people, hey, show me your glycogen stores, or hey, you have really nice glycogen stores in your leg, right? Like I'm actually going to use that. We're going to see if this happens. I'll let you guys know about it.
Look at those glycogen stores back there.
Yeah, wow. You can store a lot of glycogen in them hips. Don't do
That's
that.
funny. That's
Mm-mm.
funny. So,
But yeah, so
and
what's
I
your
realize you
focus?
can't put a number to this, but there's some number of 100% that I can store in my glycogen stores of my muscles, and then I can
Oh, you
go work
can.
out and I can do my workout. And at some point in time, I'm
Mm-hmm.
depleted and I no longer have that, and my workout's going to suffer and my energy systems change. Like, where does it matter? Like, what would you say? Like, hey, you want to make sure you're carved up enough. In order to do that, is eating carbs right before your workout? Is eating carbs the prior day? Like,
Ooh.
what what's important there? And then how do I just go make sure that I can crush my workout to the best of my ability?
Mm, I will say that
Andrew's like,
from a
I don't like
performance.
all these questions, Steve. We need to write these down in advance so I can better prepare. I can just can you guys see it on his face? Do you see the
It's just
look right
me
there?
going through my Rolodex of like, well, if this happens and then this, and kind of like tracing down the downline. So I will say that it matters. If you care about performance, which are the people that we really try to maximize some of these variables, um, yeah, I mean, ideally, this is where you would want to try to have a source of glucose circulating, as well as some amino acids, probably at like 40 to 90 minutes prior to activity. A lot of that really just depends on your ability to tolerate GI distress, or like basically if you have something gastrointestinal distress, like if you have bubble guts going into your workout, that's not really conducive to training hard. And so we try to use that as a really big guiding post for people that have to go out and perform, right? For the Joe Schmo, you should be able to more or less fast for 24 hours and like not have a complete wreckage of your performance. You might see like a 5 to 10% decrease, but you will be okay. And if you can't, then that's where we would start to be a little more concerned around metabolic flexibility, or basically your glucose flux. Um, those people tend to have like some insulin issues sometimes. They tend to really be, I mean, just poorly conditioned as well. So there's a lot of different things that show up, but I'd say 30 to 90 minutes prior, 60 being a sweet spot, having some kind of moderate glycemic index or glycemic load. Food, which is basically where, you're not necessarily super heavy on the fiber, but you're not just mainlining, table sugar. That's probably not ideal. So what we find is like a fructose glucose mix actually tends to be the best at repleting glucose and glycogen post workout as well. So prior to, I mean, like a banana, something like that. If you have it too close and you have too much, and then you also have a very rigorous warm up, you can actually tank your blood sugar a little bit and have some exercise induced hypoglycemia early on, and that can fuck up your session. So these details matter if you're able to work out hard enough to appreciate them. But if you're not, like, that's where I say, and as you're like, you can see them rolling through and like trying to figure out, I'm like, well, no, it's just
Well,
like, how
I,
confused do we
I
want the
know
audience
for
to be?
me, I go do some heavy legs and things like that. What forced me to finally start consuming something before my workouts was I'd literally finish a set of
Warming up.
squats or whatnot, and I'm seeing stars, and it's like I got to sit down for a minute so that way I don't fall down. And
Yeah.
so now I'm like, I'm just gonna have like an overnight oats and just put a bunch of things in there and some fats and some proteins and some carbs and just something
Mm-hmm,
well
mm-hmm,
rounded, a good couple hundred calories to get me going. And by the time I start getting a workout in from the time I drank it, it's not quite 40 minutes. I'm pretty
mm-hmm.
fast and efficient in the morning, waking up at 5:15 and doing my thing, but I'd say it's at
Yeah.
least 30 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
ever since, like, no more stars, no more,
Yep.
none of that, which was good, right? And I don't know that I can
Mm-hmm.
say I've noticed a massive increase in my strength or my performance, but I can tell you
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that, like, oh my God, I don't feel great feeling.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's also important to clarify that for people that are looking to gain versus not lose, those are two very different things that have like similar roots. Meaning, when we think about like being lightheaded, sometimes that's usually a blood pressure issue. It could be caused by a lot of different things and different contributors. And so when we think about waking up fasted, generally speaking, like almost out of bed within an hour of waking, you're at the gym. Um, you know, blood sugar could be an issue. You could just be a little bit fasted, right? You could also have, maybe needing a little bit more of the electrolyte supplementation first thing in the morning. Some people do the pre-workout, which is going to increase a lot of your, it's going to basically mobilize a lot of your stored blood sugar. And maybe if you haven't eaten for 12 hours prior to that and then you do that, sometimes that can also contribute to individuals definitely getting that tunnel of death sparkly flies that I actually kind of enjoy. It lets me know that I'm alive. I'm like, oh, what just
It
happened?
lets me know I'm alive. Oh,
Sometimes you just work out hard to feel something.
fair.
But no, I mean, so that's where, at the end of the day, when we look at glucose flux, we look at training, we look at, this is why it's so important to enmesh the two, which is why we adopt the paradigm of fitness coaching, personal training isn't enough anymore. Nutrition coaching isn't enough anymore. You have to overlap the two, and you have to do it in a way that's client centered to make sure that they're actually receptive. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time and you're wasting your client's attention. And those two things, when they're wasted, tend to be very divergent and bad for business.
Yeah,
So that's why we adopt the paradigm of health coaching instead of just segmenting it into either of those things.
got it. So I'm coaching somebody, and continually they go out and they refuse to eat any carbs. It's bad for them. It's not good. All the components. And we
What
talk
are
through
their
this, and
goals?
they start eating some carbs, but then they go and they just eat, like, they drink these Starbucks lattes with just like carbs upon carbs in them, and it's, in their minds, different. Like, what what what's direct Andrew, reasons or results Andrew gonna say to that client? Like, how are you gonna just
You want
grab them
that?
through the screen and shake them and be like, are you fucking kidding me?
Um, you want performance hat? Okay, so if you talk about performance
Yeah,
hat,
reasons or results,
performance
Andrew.
coaching, that's the performance coach, which is you either did or you didn't. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, are you satisfied with your current performance level? Because your current behavior suggests that you're happy where you are, which is mediocre. So you don't want to be mediocre, then maybe you should knock that shit off. If you do, that's cool. It's a different realignment conversation. And I'm happy to be a lot nicer and a lot more accommodating and empathetic if you don't care about the outcome. And so your behavior will tell me how serious I need to be. And if you're like doing everything and you're on the tee and you're filling out every single field in the coaching plan and you're also wearing your tracker and you're bringing me a lot of feedback and you're frustrated, that's where it comes to me to provide better guidance. If it's something that they're not doing all that and they're frustrated, I just kind of laugh and I'm like, you're not serious, right? You're serious? Why are you upset? What do you mean? What do you mean? And so it's just, like the client gets to be in control at the end of the day, and the coach has to be able to reflect things appropriately. And, performance is, if you're happy with the outcome, continue to do what you're doing. Maybe small tweaks. If you're not happy, you got to change something, which we look at. Do you want to change your Starbucks drinks? By the way, like when you say they're drinking Starbucks drinks and they didn't want to eat carbs, are they doing the Starbucks drinks during the time that they're not eating carbs?
Yes, they
Can we
think
just
they're not
clarify?
eating carbs.
Oh my gosh! I used to have people like, I don't eat carbs, I just eat fruit. I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
like
I've seen
like
people say
like that stuff where people, because I think that there's such this world where carbs and sugar are bad, but
oh man,
fruit and vegetables and coffees and all these other things aren't quantified in, so to speak, that bad category in their brain. And then the
yeah,
reality is none of it's actually bad as long as it's within
yeah,
reason of, call it, moderation and where
yeah,
you're supposed to be, which is this
yeah.
whole entire other conversation that has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the devil's always in the dosage, so it's always a function of how much. And so when we think about like, if someone were genuinely asking me that question and they were making those comments, I would say that their ignorance is high. And then now I just have to also figure out if they have high ignorance or a lack of, knowledge or understanding, are they receptive to understanding more about that? In which case I'd be like, oh, okay, like when you think about carbs, what do you think that means? And it becomes a conversation for me to understand their perception around it. And then if they're like, oh, well, after they feel understood, they're usually more receptive. And that's usually how I'll offer it up. I'm like, hey, did you know that? The other way that you could, as a sneaky coach that does health stuff, and meaning you also integrating fitness interventions, you just try to crush them in the gym. You create a need. You're like, all right, listen, we're going to do a lot of really high intensity intervals, and you're not going to be able to repeat them because you're just not going to have the glycogen stores to go that anaerobic for that long. So why don't we start with like 400-meter repeats if they're an endurance athlete of some sort, and we're going to give you like a shortened time interval. Let's say you got to run a 6-minute pace, right? That's a minute 30, right? So if you're doing a minute 30, let's say you get 4.5 minutes of rest. I mean, that's kind of aggressive. And so if they can, and you're supposed to do 8 of them, you got to do 2 miles of that, right? It's 48 minutes long. They might only make it through like 5 or 6 at most, and that's them gutting it out. And so that's like, all right, well, cool. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because you didn't have enough willpower? Okay. Or do you think it might be something else? Why don't we try doing this instead? Right. And they'll be like, I felt shitty after too. Like, yeah, that's crazy. Or you can have them do a 1 rep max bench press or, some kind of squat, and then have them do a neuromuscular efficiency test. Shout out to James Fitzgerald for exposing me to that like 12 years ago. Basically, like, yeah, you put 85% on the bar after a couple minutes of rest, and you do it as many times as you can. You kind of measure your nervous system, and like, there's a lot of different things that you can pull on from a lever perspective if you understand the tools. And if you don't, you need to go and learn more about fitness because they're not standalone interventions. They're very much integrative.
Yeah.
So that's my
Well,
perspective
there you
on it.
have it. Sugar, not bad. Carbs, not bad. We just need to help people understand them better. And hopefully you caught that in there where Andrew gives you a couple of tricks of how to basically bury them so they realize they just need some carbohydrates. So
It's easy when
from
they're miserable.
experience, Andrew isn't necessarily the warmest and sweetest coach all the time, but he is super knowledgeable. So appreciate you guys. Hopefully you got a little something out of that, a little different way to think about coaching some of your clients, spending some time with them and getting in their brains a little bit. Go out, get them to eat their carbs as a whole and realize they're not bad. Don't overstep and don't cause any issues. But outside of that, make sure people are doing their thing and bury them in their workout if you need to. Appreciate you spending some time with us here at Beyond the Pump, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. If you like the episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and throw some comments down there if you want to hear us talk about anything else. But until next time, gang.